Hello and welcome to this podcast. Before I begin this podcast, I want the viewers to know one thing. We've done this recording almost, I think, 8 months to a year back, and the only recording I ever lost in the last 2.5 years of doing this podcast. The credit goes to both of us, Preeti and me, but more so me because I just didn't record in time, and that has been quite an experience, and I have been waiting to get this done again. Welcome, Preeti, to the show. It is such a joy to have you back.
Thank you.
Okay, from what I remember last of our conversation many months ago, uh, I think the one distinctive fact that you told me was talk to the trees in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it helps both the trees and you. So let's start there. What is it that you do? And how does that advice really help?
Well, I have been in the environment space for quite a few years now, and I literally started as just someone. I knew I wanted to work with nature. I just didn't know how or what, and it just so happened that I quit my job, and a friend of mine took me to this urban farming space, and I just started volunteering there. So it began for me by just putting my hands in the soil and doing something. You know, it didn't start very intellectually for me. So uh, then how do you go about doing things when there were times when we used to just go and volunteer and there would be nobody to tell us. We had a mentor who would who actually played a very big role in a lot of philosophies that I know more than the science of what I know of nature that I know. So he would you know do I need to tell you everything? Why does anybody need to tell you everything? Can you not see? Can you not feel? And from there, it actually began to decoding what inherently, as a child or as a nature lover, my body knew. And I think that is where the philosophy of talking to trees came for me. कि हाँ पेड़ बोलता है, कैसे बोलता है वो अलग है, but it is also a body. It also has a body language. It also has a visual representation. It has an auric representation. So initially, it was definitely not. It wasn't like from day one you start to understand. But it is as simple as just sitting down, and when you sit with a friend for a tea or a coffee, and that person is not listening to you. उसका मन इधर उधर है, उसका ध्यान नहीं है, तुमको पता है. And जब ध्यान रहता है तभी भी पता रहता है. So that is it. That tree is that friend who's come for a tea, and you just that is that full attention that you give to that tree, or a plant, or a bird, or anything that is there in front of you. So yeah, that is what we also tell in our workshops. Most people will not understand. Most people understand philosophically, but they don't know what it actually means to do in person. And it is okay, because it literally starts with sitting down in front of the tree and giving your full attention. भले वो 5 सेकंड के लिए क्यों ना.
It's so beautiful. Many years back, I read a book. I think it was called the Celestine Prophecy.
Oh yeah.
It had something on those lines, even with human beings. While it may seem surprising, but most of us don't realize when you pay a lot of attention to what is being said, even if it doesn't agree with your point of view, which is a big deal in the world right now. Everybody is just fighting about their point of view. But just sitting and listening to someone about their point of view, it gives a lot of encouragement to the speaker, and in a way is a very positive thing, and perhaps also is part of a healing process. Not so much for what the speaker is saying, but the freedom that is being offered in saying that I care for what you have to say. So is that something close to what you're trying to tell us about trees as well?
Yeah, that is actually very true. Like, um, so I just had this experience just yesterday, where my the family I'm living with my sister, my
Can
brother,
you
and me.
speak up a
So we
little?
all went. Yeah. So we all went to the park yesterday, and
Hmm.
we started talking about what I can do in my free time, and even like it was not what I can or cannot do in my free time. That was not the gist of the topic for me, because there are a lot of things, a lot of possibilities. But what I was struggling was, am I allowed to do? I've been working for such a long time that free time to go anywhere, to do anything. In my head, I was not sure that if I was allowed to. And it wasn't about the other people making me feel anything, uh, you know, making me feel obligated or anything. But when I started talking, I realized that I cannot just talk about what I can do, where I can go or not. That is a very superficial conversation. But when I went to that level that I don't feel like I have the courage or I'm allowed to do what I want to do, that listening at that moment that I got, that it was a complete shift. There was a complete shift of uh, behavior, body language, the way I felt, opening up, smiling, all of that. So I think even with non-human creatures, there is a lot of emotions. They are sentient beings. Just and these things happen. Like sometimes you just sit under a tree and you decide, like I want to observe this tree and I want to be here completely present. Some leaf will fall, some flower, some fruit, something will fall, and I feel that these are uh, this is a
Signals.
language. Uh, this is a response. So it's a dual
Beautiful.
healing. The listener and the speaker, they're both healing actually.
Yeah. Personally, there are days when I just wake up and most days I sit to meditate. Most days, but there are some days where I feel that I need to uh, get up and go to the garden just for a walk and just be with just be. It doesn't even matter that I'm doing some great kind of exercise or walking at a brisk pace or any such thing. In fact, I do not like walking at a brisk pace, even though that is what really constitutes exercise. For me, the garden is a feeling that I try and soak in of sorts. Sometimes I haven't talked, but I haven't given attention to one particular thing. But I just say thank you many times. I'll say thank you to the grass. I'll thank you to the insects moving around, or just the general environment. And I feel a connection. It's not necessarily a very deep connection to one particular tree or one particular flower. I have maybe I'm too restless, so I need to move. Maybe that's the point. But I feel generally very grateful for that environment, and it reminds me of good days in my childhood when there was more greenery that I could go to in various ways, and I found a lot of connect better than human beings because human beings dependence on language is very strong. Now that is not the reason why I go. I think I manage to make my peace with most human beings most of the time. But there is nature and there is just the sense of being that it runs through me. I don't even have to do any extra thing or special thing. uh, so my question to you would be, is it necessary to do it in the way that you said, or is there a difference between what I am saying? How does this work? How does this environment work according to you? And are there any do's and don'ts? Obviously you don't need to cut off any flower, or those things are a given. But I mean, in terms of reading the environment or just being, how do you see this?
There's actually only one rule.
Yeah, please.
Don't let your brain interrupt.
Don't let your
brain interrupt.
Yeah,
I really don't think there is a one way of reaching something or somebody. It's just like God, there's no one way of reaching God. There's no one religion to reach God. So for me, environment has been a God. Um,
true.
I think for everybody, it's just that, and it happens. Like sometimes you'll sit there and your brain will take over and it will take you on a thought train, and all of that will happen. But also in that thought train, when you're able to see your thoughts, and this started happening for me predominantly when I was spending my time in nature. The ability to be able to even see my thoughts, ki ha bhai tu you're you're daydreaming, or you're going on a negative trail, or you're assuming too much, it's not even real. So these things I could tell myself, because there was no other noise. The only noise was my own brain. And as we are all humans, we want to dissect everything. So hai kya, it's my thoughts are only available for me to dissect. So that started happening. So I think when I say don't let your brain interrupt, मतलब ऐसे नहीं कि उसको control करो बहुत. Let it go, because when you first start to experience solitude, especially in nature, your brain will throw things out in all directions.
Yeah.
So that is also a process. Do not let it interrupt, meaning uh, just
Force things.
don't force the imagination कि ये अगर पत्ता ऐसे गिरा है तो ये ऐसे ही क्यों है, या ये इस like nature, let nature reveal itself. जो भी interconnections है, there are some birds who feed only on some particular trees, they will not feed on other trees. ये सारा जो knowledge है, let the nature reveal itself. Don't use it and try to forcefully connect the dots. That that's the human tendency. We try to put our brains too much, and when where there is not a problem, we try to fix that problem. Then that nothing is more disastrous than that.
That is, again, I'm loving this conversation because so the word that comes to me is sacred. Uh, uh, there is a question running, a very subtle question. Are two people too many on a journey with nature?
Can you repeat that?
You use the word solitude. So I'm saying when I was growing up, my mom used to tell me a story, or rather, I think I read a story like that. Two people are walking and they are quiet the entire morning. And finally, when they are about to leave, one of the guys says, "What a wonderful morning this has been." So next day, the guy avoids him and tells somebody else, "This guy talks too much." And the entire hour they were quiet, just that thing. And sometimes I find it's far too subtle. When you're in nature, there are so many things happening within also. Even when you're not using brains, it is very, it's like a cooling balm of sorts. You're facing the world for the rest of the time, and um, you have to do what things are required, what our duties are as a human being, as a parent, sister, brother, whatever our roles in the world are. But that space is so unbinding. It doesn't care whether you are a good person, a bad person, or this or that. It just is. And it allows you to be and soak in whatever is around you.
Mm.
It clarifies you to you in a way. You learn so much about yourself. Um, my question to you is, are you seen as antisocial because of this?
I grew up as an antisocial, introverted child. Um, I will actually say that when I started volunteering, I opened up and I became partially extro. I wouldn't say extroverted, but I became ambivert. And for me, it's been like I found my space. I found my strength, and that gave me the confidence to talk to people. So there were times when we used to host volunteer days. We used to host a lot of volunteer days, and I was surprised. My parents were surprised because for them, I was always like, a problem child. She has to be pushed out in the world, otherwise she's never going to go out in the world. And there they saw me inviting people into my space, hosting them, holding them, having conversations with them. So it was a complete change. I think that is what happens over a period of time, that nature teaches you that balance. And if I have learned about interpersonal skills, it's predominantly in this space. The minute you start to understand and value codependency, interdependency, then all these myths that you have in your head, know that people are bad, people are inherently aate hai, like even some, like we have had experiences, bad experiences with some of the volunteers. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes we would like, within ourselves, like, Are, isko tu deal kar, isko main nahi deal kar. Like things would happen like that. But eventually you understand, and when you understand yourself better, I think you are more kinder to other people. So when a new person comes in and they talk too much, we know that they have never had this space before. They never had a space that could hold them with such non-judgmental, loving, caring vibe. So it's fine. Let this person pour out, let this person talk as much as they want. I do have a choice, still to choose how much of it I want to listen to. If I'm distracted by somebody's noise, being in nature, that means my brain is also, my body, my brain is also not entirely with the nature.
I don't know, the word love strikes me here because it's almost like everyone is uh, looking for love in various ways, whatever ways they are. And actually, love is attention, is genuine attention and interest in another person. Whoever, it doesn't need to have a label of ABC, friendship, love, or relatives, whatever. It really doesn't matter. So I want to ask you a question about when you were not this sorted. Uh, was there a lot of suffering inside when you were an introvert and not being able to? Were you troubled by not having an expression or people not understanding you? I want to give a context because these days I talk to a lot of kids. By kids, I mean anything from 17 to 30, anything at all. And they seem to talk a lot about heavy words like anxiety and stress and depression. And I seem to understand. Uh, as a creative person, I've also been very solitary on my journey because even if you and I both are creative, suppose, and we are working together, there is still that me that I see, okay, who wants to explore a different kind of my outlook of the world, my perspective, how I want to write, being a writer, or I want to draw and think about something. So there has been this loneliness of sorts. So I do understand, but it never went to a point where I see today they are unable to deal with it, and we also were unable to deal with it. But it wasn't a serious subject. We didn't give it labels that I have this and I have this disorder, and I find it very disturbing because I would want to know what kind of conversation can help. And today, for the first time, it has struck me that it is being away from nature that is giving these kids a sense of, because human beings are now, all of them are competing to reach somewhere and trying to be something important. And they just, when we were growing up, there were 10 people who were the best in the world, and you were okay with that, and the rest of us were all average. And there was not a problem at all. And Over a period, I discovered nobody is average. Everybody is excellent at what they choose to do, even if they may not do something that agrees with my sense of achievement or perspective. So, as a achiever, loosely today, somebody who has gone through the dark nights and reached where you have, what would you tell the Preeti who was um, afraid, who was concerned, who perhaps would have belonged today? What would you tell her?
So actually, even like I grew up in the 90s. So these words were alien to me until I was in my late 20s.
Yeah,
So I had no way of even understanding or knowing what is happening to me. What am I going through?
true.
So in that sense, I feel like and it's okay. I don't think I'll go back and I'll change that. But this is an exercise that I've been doing. I've been in therapy. So this question comes around a lot in therapy. So the only thing is that you can go back and tell that child is that you need to do what you want to do and have faith in yourself, and things will turn out fine. And it sounds very cliched, but uh, there is really nothing else that you can do. If I had to go back and take away all the suffering, then I know I would be a very different person today. Then I know I wouldn't be chasing things in life that I am right now. So I don't want to go back and change anything. But when you talk about the kids today, I think the struggles that they have and what we had and what you had, like 3 generations apart, they're very different. Uh, Now, because of there is so much noise, like you just cannot shut yourself up. You cannot go back into the cave era, right? These kids are so out in the open, social media, everything. So they are going to be aware. They are going to be over aware about things. Uh, and the danger here I feel is a lot of times you understand you come to know about something conceptually, but you have not experienced it, and you start believing that you know it, but you never know anything 100% unless you have experienced it. So I think these kids have a lot to digest, and they are not in that capacity. But at the same time, when you and I say that we had to achieve something, it was very, like I like there was a rank, there was standard, there was an ink, something of that sort. What these kids are struggling right now is everything is done. दुनिया में ऐसा कोई चीज बचा नहीं है जो surprising है. There's a 5-year-old who is starting a company or coding something. So everything is done. Now, in this large population of creative people who are achieving constantly, only achieving is not enough. Where is my uniqueness? And we are so many that I don't know, we are all unique, but to find that uniqueness in so many who are um, molded in a very set pattern, finding that uniqueness of myself is so difficult. 10,000 बच्चे एक ही स्कूल में जा रहे, एक ही चीज सीख रहे, एक ही social media, their brain is feeding the same thing, their body is feeding the same thing, their soul is feeding the same thing, and their challenges, the world is asking them to be unique. किधर से आएगा वो? So the anxiety and everything that they face is very real. But of
Yeah,
course,
of
I still
course, it is real. I do
they
not
don't.
look down upon them. In fact, it is a concern because uh, I have a teenage daughter. She's yet to grow up. That is still the next generation. She's yet to come out of school and face the world at some point. In my illiterate way, I have tried to be very, very basic. The one brief I have given myself, the way I had my childhood, she will have the same kind of childhood, which is normal. Sometimes parents get angry, sometimes they are normal, sometimes you give them what they want, sometimes you don't give them what they want. Uh, yeah, there is a bit of difference. The generational gap between me and my parents and me becoming a parent, I try and be a friend in communicating, and I propose instead of impose things. So I propose, okay, look, I think this is not what you should be doing. I'll give you this much freedom to try this thing, these things, but you cannot be doing these things because you are still young. We will have to wait. I'm not saying you can't ever do them because I am not going to be there forever. So you will get your time when you need to do them. Right now, I am responsible for you as a guardian. So I give you this space. And this is the reason why I'm not giving you this space. So I respect her as an individual before I propose whatever I'm proposing. Some days when I'm frustrated and I'm like a normal individual, I say I'm your dad, and that's the end of argument. Because that's how I grew up. My dad never explained to me why you just got one crack and said, okay, this is the end of conversation. How dare you ask me why am I doing this? So at least that's what I'm not doing. But I'm your dad. Today you are not having that conversation with me because I'm fed up and I don't want to explain. Which is something that she respects. And after 2 hours, when both of us have kind of cooled down or are not worried, because the other way around also happens sometimes. If she says, okay, I don't want your friendship right now, to hell with you. Which I'm okay. And I'm saying, yeah. So both of us have this pact that after a couple of hours, we will talk as if this didn't happen. And if we want to talk about the event, we can talk about it or else let it go. If we both are sure we have a different point of view, we will not talk about it. Maybe some other day or we'll figure out. So sometimes when she's in a mood and I want to tell her something, in fact, there is a good thing also. Sometimes when she is broaching a conversation, me being a conservative parent, finally I come from an old school of thought. So I quickly blurt out all the gyan I have. Fatapat, this is what I think, this is what I think. So that she can sit in peace and think about it. कि करना है कि नहीं करना है जो भी है. At least मैंने अपना ज्ञान दे दिया. As a parent, I am out of it. So my question comes from there. If there is respect, we also spoke about this a couple of minutes earlier when I spoke about talking to human beings with the intent to listen. Most of the time, a couple of guests have refused to come on the show, saying that you have to give us a list of questions. I don't have a list of questions. I am as much in the, if I am expecting you to come out and open yourself up on camera, I cannot be prepared for it myself. If I'm not allowing you that freedom, I should also not get the freedom. We should just both jump into it and figure out what is happening. And I will also honestly tell you my experiences, however vulnerable I feel about them. I think that much respect is required, and that is all that is required. You still, I need that answer from you. I haven't got that. With your present experience and you being in the middle of, say, the generation that I'm talking about, and kind of us who are kind of a little older than you, what are your to-dos to, like, there are people who are volunteering to come to you and they are talking a lot, and you mentioned that you have to give them space. That's a beautiful thing to think. करो इधर कुछ भी, यहाँ कोई पेरेंट नहीं बोलेगा ऐसा करो वैसा करो, जो भी करना है देखेंगे. So I want to know how and what is that mind space that you give to this generation to make them feel peaceful. Do you do that consciously? Do you?
There is one thing in my consciousness every time, that I don't want to judge anyone. I don't want to impose myself on anyone, and everybody is born with free will. Beyond that,
Sorry,
I
can
don't.
you repeat the last line?
Everybody is born with free will.
Born.
So intentionally, I don't, like, there's no preparation in my head that these are the do's and don'ts. But with, I start with this intention and I see where it goes. Like, there have been times when being approachable and very conscious, intentional decision to be approachable sometimes does backfire. It's not always a cakewalk. There are times when volunteers will cross a line that is completely not okay, either with some other volunteer or with the nature or the plant that they're working with. If they're coming with a space of not knowing what their actions are and what the consequences are, then you can always sit down and talk to them. But when somebody is coming from an intentional harm, I really don't understand what to do. And at that time, I do get triggered. I do get angry. Sometimes I do act out on my anger, like you said. Sometimes because you are also on your journey. You're not God, so you are
Yeah,
also human, and you will react. And it is just the way you think that other person should be held, should be respected. I think if you are having uncomfortable emotions, that also need to be respected and allowed to be expressed. वो बस ऐसे rationally act out करना, somewhere it became irrationally act out करना somewhere कम होते गया अपने आप, पर ऐसे कुछ सोच के प्लान करके नहीं था. I will like to share one experience here.
please.
Last 2 years ago, when I was living in Pondicherry, me, one more friend of mine who is the same age, she's actually my college classmate. We started our volunteering journey together. So we are both in the environmental space, and we were sharing the house with 3 other teenage boys, and they were homeschooled. They were quite liberal in their way of living, and so many times I have found myself repeating my mother's sentences exactly in the same way while dealing with them. And that time it was like, oh, at that moment I understood why my mother would say something like that, or why she would get angry or behave some in a certain way. And it's it's okay, like we want to give the young ones their space and their freedom and to find everything, but even in nature, if you see a parent, lion, monkey, whatever, a parent is a space holder. And as a space holder, uh, they understand that what is, matlab, the most important is what? The sanctity of that space. If you are in a house, if that house has to be kept clean, you and that is the way you're going to maintain the sanctity of that house, then that is the top priority. फिर वो सामने वाले को तुम कैसे समझाते हो, वो समझता है कि नहीं समझता है, then use another technique. And if it has to come to scolding somebody or being very assertive, or sometimes even blunt and harsh, then if it is the need of that moment, then it is the need of that moment. And ये मेरे को तभी समझ में आया when I was in that parental kind of a role. So it's okay if the young ones don't understand at that minute.
Yeah.
Time will catch up.
Time will catch up. I like the fact because I would definitely share this episode with a couple of kids that will enjoy listening to you. It's more contemporary a voice and very sane and rational and very empathy laden. It's not that you mean to give gyan to anybody per se. So I like that tone of voice. One question I have is about, tell me about self-acceptance in the space that you operate, the work that you do, because you mentioned urban farming. Now, urban space by itself is little greed oriented, and we are forever trying to maximize the opportunities and the money and the service, and I don't know what are we trying to do with it. Sometimes it just wears me out. It's so much of greed to have more about everything when we can't even manage what we have to start with.
Right.
I don't even know where are we leading with this kind of attitude. So you've been an introvert, and with all your quote unquote extrovertedness, I think somewhere you might be finding yourself out of place with urban ways of dealing with things. How do you accept yourself in an environment which does not seem conducive to growth, which is slow, which is deliberate, which needs time, which needs solitude, uh, which cannot jump to conclusions because you need to know what you're about. Um, how do you deal with this? Is there a mantra you have?
I don't, and this has been the most difficult aspect to deal with in my life for the past couple of years. Although I started with urban volunteering, urban farming and everything, it's been a few years now that I left the urban space and I moved to the rural space. So I keep, which is why we couldn't even get on call for such a long time. I keep going out. So within a month, it's probably 5 days or 1 week that I'm in the city. Rest of the weeks, I'm at some site or the other. I don't know if this is the right way of dealing. Right now, the way I'm dealing with it is escapism. I am escaping the urban spaces, which is also why I suddenly felt very like not grounded when I came to US, because I'm right in the middle of a city where the only natural spaces are parks, and parks are also like volleyball court, basketball court. Like you can see the grass is also fake grass. There's some
Oh,
pockets here where there'll be green grass or trees. There are enough trees, but it's still a city, and it is making me very irritatable. So I am not at present dealing with that issue in my life. And I don't know. I've been asking myself this question for a very long time, because it's been my dream to just have a land, go back to the land, build my own farmhouse and live there and shut out the whole world. And then there is this another space where, like, I recently conducted a workshop for Rotary Club in Thane, and it was about urban kitchen gardening. And the kind of questions these people asked, and after the workshop, the way they were all approaching, and they were all so curious about how they can do something. So I am like split in these two things, that there is a need, and uh, if I can stay here and make the people and environment better of an urban space, then should I do this, or should I be selfish and just leave everything and go where it's all easy, basically. Not and it has its own struggles, but it is still very easy. So I don't know, I'm still like confused.
one of the questions that is coming to me, this series is called The Other Side of. Now, since you threw away the urban farmer label that was running in my head, rural farmer, you're not the typical rural farmer that you look at. A title that came to my head now when you said that you're trying to mix your own vulnerability with trying to serve the world that you love so much, obviously, is the other side of an eco-friend.
Mm.
Maybe that's what you are, a friend of ecology, environment. I don't know what are the differences technically between all of these, but more that you are a friend to the earth or
Yeah.
I actually read a lot of, earlier also I've read a lot about the earlier American settlements, which were the
Hmm.
locals, Red
Native
Indians and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and their point of view fulfilled a lot of space in my heart. When when one is growing up, you're struggling with the world as it is coming up as of right now,
Hmm.
and the urban spaces, the I think just the humanness of it all. And
Right.
by human, I mean we are just part of nature and just letting go and just being for a while without being so busy and adamant and arrogant and proud of achievements of certain kinds. In my life, I'm dealing with artificial intelligence. Right now, I don't even know what kind of beast that is. The lucky part I've had is that
Nobody knows.
the lucky part is that the couple of times when I was forced to use it, my clients came back. I try and work with agencies, so I don't have to work with direct clients most time. Sometimes I do. So the clients came back to the agency, find a new writer. I said, good, because I, for my life, don't understand this. It's like perfect grammar. Everything is given to you. There is nothing to,
Yeah.
but there is no, I don't know, there is no mistake. So there is nothing dark about it, or there is nothing wrong with it. And I don't know what to feel about it. I have no feelings. So yeah, it is quite strange. So is that all right with you if I call you an eco-friend on the podcast?
I would actually love that, because this was something that came up a few years ago. There was this one volunteer who said that, we are doing this to save the planet, save this, save that. And I'm like, who are we to save anything?
Exactly.
So I'm not an eco warrior or an environmentalist or anything. Then farming happened, like on in rural sectors, farming happened. And I'm like, I don't think I'm a farmer. Look at that person. Like, he's been farming since he was probably 4 years old. I cannot compete with that person. Secondly, farming was never my interest. Like, I never thought that I'll be a big farmer and I'll have so much of produce and I'll sell and this and that. I got into it because I used to like exploring nature. So I did come to a point last year where I was like, who am I? Even in this space, I was like, who am I? I'm again in a place of confusion. Um, few months back, uh, some clarity came to me when I was traveling back from Odisha. It was one break that I took for myself, and I felt like I need to start something where environment and spirituality, for the lack of words, but just environment cannot be approached from merely a scientific approach. It has to be a human approach. It has to be an emotional approach. And this is where I felt like I had something to offer, because as a child, whenever I was suffering, I was always in the garden. So that's been a healing, as nature has been more of a healer for me. So I
So,
wanted to kind of those two things together and start something. So I started something called as Purnamidam Eco Consciousness Development Organization. It's still in the making. I'm not yet openly shared to about this to many people. Only my friends know. And in this space, I want to invite people to explore nature and find whatever their learning is.
is there any place where you feel concerned about livelihood and material things? Is that a concern at all, or are you so rich that you don't have to bother?
No, that's a big concern. Uh, if I don't have to do anything for the rest of my life, I know I can live a very out in the forest के forest में किधर तो एक झोपड़ी बना के रहना, with that kind of life I can definitely do comfortably. uh, but no, I'm not that rich to live this life and not work.
How
So
do
that
you manage this?
so right now, I've been working with a lot of NGOs on projects, doing plantations, designing land, designing reforestation farms, etc., training farmers and everything. My dream would be someday to have my own forest land and teach, not teach, but like I said, hold that space. And there are some modules which create that space, games, trails, activities, meditation. They are merely like triggers. वो बस चाबी होनी चाहिए, but that person should predominantly explore their own learnings in that space. So I have been doing trial and errors of small workshops when I was in Mumbai. Now I'm here, I don't know what to do.
I have run out of questions, but I have a wish for you. May these couple of months that you have to do some soul searching in a space that doesn't appeal to you too much because of fake grass. I agree with you on the fake grass bit fully. One of my childhood memories is running through grass and feeling those insects biting you, and even grass actually hurts
Yeah,
you. If
yeah.
people, I don't know if kids today know that,
It
it is
pokes
not
you.
easy. It is not
You
easy to
can't sit
run
on the
through.
grass.
It actually hurts you quite severely if you're not careful.
Yeah.
But may this space where the universe has put you for a reason, I'm sure, uh, open up even more avenues of thought, uh, which help you give back to the world and live a fulfilling life for yourself. I am I am so glad that we had this conversation. This is
Thank
going to
you.
be one of my
I'm
favorite
actually very
conversations.
happy. I was actually thinking what will I say because I've been going through some emotional fluctuations. But yeah, I was like, whatever happens.
Yeah.
I'm very glad.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. I
Thank you.
shall see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.